Hey everybody, my name's Thomas Turner. I'm a director in our managed cloud infrastructure practice here at RSM. And with our partnership in Microsoft and the work we're doing through Tech for Social Impact, I wanted to show you guys how you can leverage a Microsoft 365 Small Business Premium E3 or E5 license to help protect donor data. So let's jump in and take a look at what that is. So I'm at a browser right here, and I'm going to jump over to compliance.microsoft.com. In the compliance portal, on the left-hand side, I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I have information protection. And in here, I have an overview, I have labels, label policies, and auto labeling. If I go to labels, these are ways that we can tag data within your environment and then protect that data or put controls around that data because of the tag that's on it. And if you think about that, it's easy for data loss prevention. It's easy for programs to identify known sensitive information types like social security numbers, driver's licenses, medical ICD-9 and 10 codes, things of that nature. But where it gets a harder for these programs to identify data is when it comes to like birthdays, donor data, things that aren't known to be sensitive information, but if they're in the right hands or in the right context, it's very sensitive information for your organization. So in this example, what we can do is we can leverage Microsoft's 365 information protection to build out labels to help protect that donor data so we can identify where it's at, who has access to it, and ensure that if it does go out the door, it goes out the door in a protected manner. So let's jump in and build that label. So here, I'm going to click Create a Label. And in this label, I'm going to call it donor data. Now, at the top here, you'll see this is the name that IT is going to see when they're looking at labels in the back end. The display name is what the end users will see. And then in the description is what the end users will see if they ran their mouse over the label and got a little drop down of what that label meant. So whenever they run their mouse over it, it'll say use this label to tag donor data. And then descriptions for admin, I usually put, requested by, it'll say Thomas Turner, date 10/10/23, ticket number, oop, and then put your ticket number in there, something of that nature. So that way, 2, 3 years down the road, I know who requested this label and I have a help desk ticket to go back and reference to see if we followed proper change control, things of that nature. Now I'm going to go to next here. So on this next page, I get, where do I want to apply these files? Where do I want to apply these labels? So I definitely want to be able to apply them to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, email messages, calendar meeting invites. I also can apply it to, data sets in Azure if I wanted to. And then also data sets in AWS. So I'll say, yep, I'm sure I'm fine with all of that. I can add or remove encryption, or I can apply a content marking. If I apply a content marking, I can do a header, a footer, or a horizontal or diagonal watermark. Or if I wanted to do encryption on that label, this actually protects the file itself. So if you think back in the day, we used to have a firewall. All of our corporate assets were on one side, the Wild West of the internet was on the other side. And as long as everything was behind that firewall, everything was good to go. But nowadays, end users want that data everywhere. They want it on a computer, they want it in the cloud, they want it on their iPhones, etc. So instead of worrying about the container that data is sitting in, we want to protect the data itself. So no matter where that data moves to, we know that data is still protected using the same security and encryption controls that we set when we built the data or when we tagged the data to begin with. So in here, what I'll do is I'll say, yep, I want to add that encryption. And I can then say, let's assign this encryption now, or let the end user assign it so they can see what they feel necessary for that data. For this example, I'm going to say assign it now. Do I want the access to the content to expire? No. Do I want to allow access offline? So for this one, we usually say, a day. And the reason we say a day is because if somebody's on an airplane, if somebody's in the car, they're out at a job site or they're out doing a service call and they don't have good internet connection, we want them to be able to open up these files, but we're going to say, hey, you have to be on the internet at least once every 24 hours to re-authenticate your information to make sure you can open these files up. So we don't want to lock you down to where you can't ever open up these files if you're not online, but we do want to make it to where you can't take them offline and then do whatever you want with them. So we're going to put a timer on there. And then what we can do is we can assign permissions. So in here, I'm just going to say anyone in my organization, we're going to give full access to. But now, let's say I work with a third party. I'm doing work with RSM. I'm doing work with Microsoft. I'm doing work with another third party um, tech for social impact type provider. And I need to give them access to this donor data, but I don't want to give them full access to the donor data. Well, I can get granular with permissions there. And to do that, I can go assign permissions and I can say specific email addresses. And in here, I'll put rsmus.com, which is our domain. But again, RSM doesn't need full permissions. We might just need to be able to view it, or we might need to put in custom permissions. But in this scenario, I'm just going to say RSM just needs to view that data. They're not going to do anything else with it because they're just helping us promote the information, etc. So now you'll see we have it set up to where if I apply this donor data to a file, that file is now encrypted. Anyone within my organization can do whatever they want to the file as long as they are an active user. And then anyone at RSM can view the file, but they can't edit it, modify it, print it, etc. We'll click on next again. Here I can get into auto labeling, but this is a way that we can kind of look through documentation to identify pieces of it, and if it meets a certain threshold, automatically apply this donor label. We can go through that at a different time. Do I want to apply it to SharePoint groups, Microsoft 365 groups, etc.? Not in this example. Do I want to put it into third-party assets, Azure PaaS services, AWS PaaS services? Not in this example either. And then I get an overview of what I built, and I can create that label. Now that the label itself is built, we want to actually jump in and build a policy that pushes that label to our end user population so they can start applying this to documents. And you'll see here it says, do I want to apply a label? Or do I want to apply this label to a policy or not yet? I'm going to choose not yet just because I want you guys to see where to go if you weren't doing it all in one push. So here you'll see my list of labels, and then you'll see that new donor label at the bottom here. If I go to label policies and click publish a label, I can say, do I want to push all my labels out there? Probably not, but I do want to push this donor label out there. And when we're looking at pushing labels out to end users, we want to follow a crawl, walk, run methodology. And crawling means, hey, we're going to push that label to the end users, but we're not going to force them to use it. We're going to train them on how to use it and see who adopts it and who doesn't using logging on the back end. And then the end users who don't adopt it, we can go and we can provide additional training, or we can work with leadership to find out how this end user needs to be, how we can work with that end user to make them successful. When we get into the walking stage, that's when we will automatically recommend these labels to people based on the sensitive information that's inside of the documents they're working on, but we're not going to force them to use the label. And we want that recommendation because, again, the program can get it wrong. And if it's wrong, we want them to push back and say, hey, this is a false positive, this label doesn't apply, etc. So we can adjust the program if needed. And then when we get into the run phase, we can automatically apply labels just based on the contents of the document. But again, if we don't train the users how to do it in crawl, if we don't look for false positives or push back in walk, we'll have a very painful run stage because it's going to be auto labeling a lot of things incorrectly. So again, in this example, we're only pushing out one label, so not a huge deal. Who do I want to push it out to? I can say, hey, I want to push it out to everybody in the company. Here we go. I want to push it out to everybody in the company. Or if I wanted to, I could do just distinct groups. And I don't have to do, everyone in the company. I could do individual users. I could do it by department if I wanted to. So you can get granular with who you want to push labels out to. And in this scenario, we're pushing it out to everybody, but you could build finance specific labels. You could put in fundraising specific labels and then push just those labels to the individuals within your organization that require access to those labels. That they're not going to need everything under the sun. Um, Once we're saying, yep, we know we want to push it to everybody, so we'll click next again. Do we want them to provide a justification for moving to a lower label? So again, we're only pushing out one label, but if I was pushing out a confidential and a highly confidential or a um, internal only and a public label, well, if something's highly confidential or internal only and I wanted to make it public or a lower level of classification, I may want my end user to give me a justification. I'm going to let you do this, but why are you doing this? Why does this make sense for the organization? Just so I have a log on the back end. Do I want to require end users to apply labels to all of their documents? In the crawl stage, no. But in the walk stage, definitely, I want them to apply those labels because I want to know where false positives pick up so we can adjust the program as needed. Do I want them to require to put labels in Power BI content? And then do I have a custom link for a help desk page? And this is if they're in the product and they click on help, will it bring them to our help desk site? Will it bring them to a training video or something of that nature? So I'm not going to check any of these. What do I want my default label to be? And here I'm not going to say any default label, but if again, if I was pushing out multiple labels, I may want my default to be internal only, or I may want my default to be confidential, and then the end users would have to change that label based on what they're doing with the document. All right, let's go next again. If I'm applying a document to an email, so if I apply a document that's, labeled confidential and I apply that or I attach that document to an email, do I want the email to have the same label as the document? It sounds like a good idea. And then do I want the email to inherit the highest priority label? So again, if I'm pushing out multiple labels and I have one that's highly confidential, confidential, and public, and I attach 3 documents to that email, and each document has a different label, I want the email to take the highest classification there. Again, only pushing out one label, so I'm not going to worry about that. Calendars and events, Power BI content. I'm going to label this one donor data policy. And I'm going to click next and then submit. So now that we've pushed out a very simple label and we pushed out that label policy to push it all of our end users, like it's saying on screen, it can take up to 24 hours for that label to kick in. I'm going to jump over to a virtual machine and see if I can push it faster and then jump in and show you what it looks like on the end user side of the house.